Hi, thank you for joining us for this month's Winona webinar. I'm Ashley. I'm the head of patient services at Winona. And today we have Dr. Green, our chief medical officer, and I'm going to let him give a little introduction about himself and then we'll start kicking off the webinar.
Hi, my name's Mike Green. I'm an OBGYN. I think a lot of you, well, if you've been to one of these before, you've kind of know my background. And some of you, we've been interacting online. I started actually as family practice and realized that I don't really like taking care of sick people. And so I did a whole second residency in OBGYN, which let me deliver babies and do women's health, which is really something that I'm passionate about. So Winona has really given me the outlet to be able to take care of women going through the menopause transition because unfortunately, due to sort of a lot of historical things and poor training, it's not done well in a lot of medical offices, including OBGYNs. And so this is a way to get medication to women that really need it in a safe way and in a way that's not really necessarily accessible to people otherwise, and make it easy for people. So, you don't have to go to the doctor's office. You don't have to wait in the waiting room. You don't have to wait in the room with the little paper gown. You don't have to go to the pharmacy. You can just sit in the privacy of your own home and get a board-certified OBGYN's opinion and prescriptions, and they get mailed to you. So that's sort of the concept, and really excited about it because I think it's a great way to take care of people. So we're here really to answer your questions. So Ashley, can you kind of go over how to do that?
Yes, absolutely. So over the next hour, you can ask Dr. Green any of your menopause HRT questions. How you're going to be doing that is using the chat feature in the bottom right-hand corner. You can type your message in the box under everyone, send it out, I'll read it live, Dr. Green will answer, and you can continue the chat in the chat box with any extra questions that you have.
So while we're waiting for questions, I've got a couple things I want to talk about. The first is expectations. And we live in a fast world society, and we all want instant results. I know I do, but that's not really the way these medicines necessarily work, and it can be frustrating. Sometimes there are some great results right away, and there are certain things that tend to respond more quickly than others. But some things take a long time because part of what we're doing is really changing the basic metabolism for things like, helping with weight loss, things like hair and skin changes. Those really take a lot of finesse within the body, and it takes a while for these medications to work. First, it takes some time for the medications to get a good blood level, but even then, there's metabolic effects and changes that take a while to really manifest. And so it can take 3 months before things are really starting to click and work well. And that's frustrating. I get it. It's frustrating for me too. I would love for you to take the first pill and all of a sudden all your dreams will come true. That would be like the greatest thing ever. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So one of the things that we're always talking to our patients about is patience. And it's hard. But, we're in this for the long term. And, this is not one of these, things as seen on TV, take this pill and everything will be great. This is real medications that take a while to work, but when they do, they can make a big impact. And so the way we've got it set up is we check in at 2 weeks just to make sure, you're using the product okay, the medications came in the mail, there's no bugs there. And then we check in again really we call it a 10-week checkup, but it's really at about the 11-week mark since you got the medication. So it's about 10 weeks after you started the medication. And at that point, that's the time to really look at how's it going, because now I expect results. If there aren't results at that time, then it's time to start changing things around and maybe increasing a dose or decreasing a dose or changing this or changing that to really get the benefits. But before that, at a month or even at the 2-month mark, there's still benefit waiting to happen. And the problem is if we start increasing medications before they've had a full chance to work, you're going to end up on more medicine than you need. And then we start risking getting side effects. So patience here is really important. So that's sort of the first thing. And really it's trying to encourage you that this stuff works, but it does take time. And so hang in there. The second is, it's a headline that came out. I heard it, I forget where I first heard it, but it was all over the internet about 3 weeks ago. And that was that there was an article in the New England Journal of Medicine that said intermittent fasting doesn't work. And if you've been on the webinars or spent any time on your website, you know that I'm a big believer in intermittent fasting. I use it myself. I lost a bunch of weight on it, and I'm maintaining my weight. I could still use, it could still be better to lose a little bit more, but there's a balance between enjoying life and being in a moderately unhealthy weight. But intermittent fasting has really helped me get to a place where I'm okay and stay there. And so I kind of preach it quite a bit because I think it's a really nice way for some people to lose weight and to diet. It doesn't work well for my wife because she's one of these people that needs to sort of eat all the time or she doesn't feel well. I'm kind of a eat big meals and move on, and so it works really well for me. So there was this big headline that said intermittent fasting doesn't work. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So I pulled up the New England Journal article and read it for myself. It's like, where are they getting this from? And so it turns out when they did a study looking at intermittent fasting and they compared it to a traditional low-calorie diet, and they had people do this for a year, the people that used intermittent fasting lost 18 pounds, losing on average with intermittent fasting. The people that were on a traditional diet lost about 16 pounds. And so basically there wasn't enough difference to say that intermittent fasting was better than a traditional diet. But they still lost 18 pounds. So that's pretty good. I'd sure be happy with an 18-pound weight loss doing intermittent fasting. And they actually lost a little bit more than the people that were on a traditional diet, although it wasn't enough to be what we call statistically significant. So that could have just been the same and just sort of random chance. But the point was, it wasn't any worse than a regular diet and maybe a little bit better, but people still lost on average 18 pounds intermittent fasting. So how do they get this headline that intermittent fasting doesn't work? And so the reason that they say this is that it didn't beat regular diet. So it's not some kind of magic thing where, oh, you do this and, this is way better than a traditional low caloric diet. It's not necessarily that way, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It still does work. It's just another tool, another way that for some people may be easier to follow and easier to accomplish than a traditional low-calorie diet. It's certainly, in my opinion, sort of easier conceptually. It takes less time to worry about because it's pretty easy for me to know, I just got to look at my watch. Okay, I can start eating and then try to eat reasonably, then trying to count calories all day long and, account for every single thing that goes in my mouth, and do without as we do in a normal caloric deficit diet. So intermittent fasting does work. It just may not work better than a traditional diet. But so if that's an easier way to do it for you, it's effective. And in this study, the average patient lost about 18 pounds. You kind of take this a step further, and this is why it's so dangerous to get your medical news and information from the internet, from even the broadcast news or the newspapers, because everything's headline driven. Everybody wants a click, and so people want to make things sensational. Saying, hey, they did a study and people lost 18 pounds on intermittent fasting was about the same as a regular diet. That's not going to generate the same kind of interest as a big headline saying, New England Journal of Medicine says intermittent fasting doesn't work, but it does work. And so there's a lot of things like that. And unfortunately, we can be really misled by getting our information from these sources. And so you really want to get your information from experts, or if you have the ability or you're an expert, from reading like I did, because I hear this and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And so I pulled the original research article and read it and said, oh, okay, that's the game they're playing. Yeah, it does work. So be careful what you read out there. If you hear something that doesn't sound, that sounds like what I'm telling you is wrong or what someone else is telling you is wrong, shoot me a message and, I'll help you with that. If I have to, look up the original article and try and figure out where they're coming from, and try and explain it to you, at least from an area of expertise where I sort of understand more of the nuance and maybe have access to more of the information than just reading a New York Times article. So anyway, that's sort of my monologue for today. Hopefully we got some questions now I can answer.
We have a few. I'll start it off with Cynthia's question. She said, I've been on medication for about 7 months. It has been making me feel so much better. I've noticed recently that some of the night sweats are still starting a little again, not intense or anything, does this just mean that I need to tweak the dosage?
Yes, it may. And there's couple of things going on. Probably one thing in particular. And honestly, I recognize your name, but I don't recognize your specifics, and I wouldn't share them in a public forum anyway. But the ovaries don't just shut down one day. Over a long period of time, really beginning in the 30s and ending probably in the 60s, they just become less efficient and less efficient at producing hormone. And it's mostly, for most people, a slow, gradual process. The exception to that is people that have surgically had both of their ovaries removed. Then it's a dramatic all-at-once boom thing. And those women tend to suffer a lot from symptoms just because it's such a dramatic night and day. But for most women, the ovaries sort of gradually become less efficient and make less hormone over time. And there's two parts of that. That's one part. The other part is that as they become less efficient, the hormone production also becomes less constant and less consistent. So it'll be able to release a whole bunch of hormone, and then it won't release any, and it sort of spits and spats, and it kind of goes up and down. And that can cause a lot of grief and a lot of the symptoms. But some of the symptoms are also from this sort of gradual decrease over time. And so it's possible, over 7 months, that the medication, in addition to the ovarian contribution of the hormone, was enough to take care of your symptoms. And now that the ovary is not making as much hormone and not contributing enough, we may need to add a little bit more hormone to get you back to that level that makes you comfortable. So yeah, this is not unusual. I can tell you that my wife is going through the exact same thing, and it's sort of a typical thing, is that as the ovaries make less and less hormone, we have to give back a little bit more to get you still feeling well and getting your level where it should be. So maybe that we need to tweak the dose a little bit. And that should be fairly easy to do.
All right, another question from Diana. Why do some people gain weight, especially in the breasts and hips, when starting HRT?
So some weight gain or some increase in the breasts, in particular, it can be normal. If it's excessive, it may be that the dose of estrogen is too high. The other thing is that the normal metabolism for younger women is weight going really sort of in the breasts and the hips, the so-called hourglass shape, and not so much in the belly. As menopause approaches, the metabolism starts to change, and we get fat deposition more centrally in the belly and in the viscera, the inside fat, and not as much in the breast and hips. One of the long-term goals really is to decrease that belly fat, because not only do people not like the way it looks, but it's much more unhealthy to carry fat in the viscera, in the belly, in the central core, than it is to carry it more in the breast and hips. So if it's an immediate change, it's probably just an immediate reaction to the estrogen, and that tends to sort of mellow out over time. But long term, there may be some increase of fat deposit, sort of more like the younger shape that women are used to, and away from the belly, which actually is one of the goals. But if it's an immediate thing, that's probably just a short-term estrogen effect, and most likely more water retention than actual fat deposition if it happens right away, because the fat deposition actually takes quite a while.
Nicely said. Another question from Jacqueline. I'm concerned about side effects. How long am I allowed to do this therapy?
So you're allowed to do it as long as you want, because it's your body. So there isn't sort of a law against, the Supreme Court's not going to say, okay, 5 years, you're off. It's more an idea of how much benefit are you getting? Is it worth the expense, the risk, and the hassle of taking medication? And so the average woman is going to be on hormone replacement therapy for about 5 years. There's a huge variation in that. There are some women that take it much, much longer. There are some individuals that choose to stay on it for the rest of their lives. But most women don't necessarily need to be on it that long. It kind of depends on what the symptoms are. So my advice really is to stay on it for 2 to 3 years, and then try a trial off of it and see how you do. At some point, you might find that you feel the same off of it as you do on it, and you've sort of gone through that transition period, and it's no longer that important anymore. At that point, there's no point taking it. My personal opinion is that we all ought to be on the fewest medications possible to keep us healthy. There's no point taking medications that you don't need, because number one, there's risks involved in every medication. Number two, they cost money and they take time. And so why do something that's not useful? But as long as it's helping you make you feel better and your life is better on it than off of it, unless something changes in your medical history that make things too risky, it's safe to stay on it as long as you need, as long as you need it to make you feel better. The risks are very small, and the risks really change at when you start the medication. So we know that women that start hormone replacement therapy before age 60, on average, have a longer life expectancy and a healthier life than women that have never been on it at all. And that's depending, irrespective of how long they need to be on it. And that is mostly because of the cardiovascular benefit that we see before in starting it early like that. And the number one killer of women, of everybody really, is cardiovascular disease. And so if we can decrease that risk of cardiovascular disease, we're going to keep you healthier and living longer. The long-term risks of being on it are pretty small. But again, if you don't need it, there's no point taking it. And so 5 years is the average. I would say after 2 to 3 years, give it a month or so of going off it and see how you feel. And if you find, oh my gosh, all these feelings are coming back, then we restart it and get you feeling good again. And if it's, hey, I feel about the same, then there's no point taking it. So that's the strategy I would use.
Okay. Moving on. I've been on estrogen and progesterone cream for a month and DHEA pills. I feel great, much more energy and sharper. My main issues were fatigue and brain fog. I did gain a few pounds, so wondered if that might just be an initial increase due to the hormones. My diet has not changed. My weight has stayed the same for many years.
It's not uncommon to gain a few pounds in the first month or so of treatment, and that's usually some water retention from the estrogen. That goes away as the body equilibrates and gets used to it. Sometimes it can take 2-3 months before you're sort of back down, and then if you're trying to lose weight, that's when the weight loss really starts kicking in. But that initial couple of pounds is usually water retention, and it usually goes away. The other thing that people talk about with weight, one of the reasons HRT has this sort of bad reputation for weight gain, which isn't really true in the medications we use, has to do with the progesterone. And some of the synthetic progesterones, particularly Provera is famous for this, and it's probably the most common synthetic progesterone that's used when people don't use bioidentical HRT, is really known for stimulating appetite. And the higher the dose of that progesterone, the more risk there is of appetite stimulation and therefore causing weight gain. There's a birth control method called Depo-Provera. It's a shot, and it's well known that this causes a lot of weight gain in some individuals. We all have, all of us OBGYNs have people, that we've tried to shot on, and they come back in 3 months and they're 50 pounds up. And we're like, oh my gosh, it can happen. It doesn't happen the same way with the bioidentical progesterone that we use. It really works differently and doesn't have that appetite stimulation side effect that some of the other progestins have. And so with the bioidentical hormones that we're using, it really shouldn't cause real weight gain. Certainly some water weight at the beginning, but you don't get that appetite stimulation from the progesterone that we see with the synthetic progesterones. And the combination really of replacing your hormones, particularly the estrogen and the testosterone from the DHEA, really can affect your metabolism. And as I was saying before, get some of that weight off the belly and either get rid of it completely or move it out into a more healthy place and get you that hourglass figure rather than the sort of apple figure of menopause, which most people enjoy.
Okay. Another question. I have a friend who missed her estrogen window. She's 59 and postmenopause. She feels she's aged rapidly because she did not do HRT, especially compared to her friends that had been on HRT. Her skin, hair, etc., has dramatically changed. Is it too late for her to start HRT for other benefits, like for her skin and hair and overall well-being?
So she's got till her 60th birthday. So she hasn't, that window has not quite closed yet. It's still open a crack. So 60 is the magic number, and it really has to do with data, mostly from the Women's Health Initiative study, but even data beyond that, where we found that women that start HRT, as I said before 60, do better than women that start after 60. Cutoffs are funny because the truth is, if you're 59 and 364 days, and we start estrogen today, there's really no difference between doing that and doing it tomorrow or the next day. The problem is we sort of have to have these cutoffs, and we have to draw lines in the sand. Otherwise, you get this creep. It's like, okay, well, she's just turned 60. Okay, well, she's only 3 months past her 60th birthday. All right, she's only 61. Okay, she's only 65. And eventually, by doing that, we start hurting people. And so you kind of have to draw these lines and hold fast to them. Otherwise, again, you end up causing problems. Believe me, the absolute last thing I want to do is hurt somebody. My number one thing is patient safety. So if something's not safe, I won't do it. I won't recommend it. Even if somebody begs me, it's like, no, it's just not safe. Sorry, I'm not going to do that. Because that's the most important thing. I want you to feel better and, age better and all that too. But if I kill you, who cares if you're a beautiful corpse? I mean, that's not what we're after. So your friend who's 59, actually, she's still okay if she hurries. And it would be safe to start HRT now. And she'd still get a lot of benefit from it. She will get, for most people, they do get improvement in the skin and the hair. It's not going to go back to what it was when she was 15, obviously, but it will improve quite a bit. And there is improvement to be had, and it'll slow down that aging process, as she's noticed between her and her friends. So she's still good if she hurries. But I don't know when she can turn 60, but at 59, she's still okay.
Okay. Next question. Hi, I was taking progesterone for 2 years. I stopped my period last September. I started to have hot flashes and was prescribed estrogen, a small dosage. But I cannot take it. I get awful headaches and my legs get swollen.
Unfortunately, every individual is different in how they respond to medication. I'm not sure how you've tried the estrogen. I've noticed that sometimes changing the way we administer it can make a big difference. So if you were trying pills, it may be worth trying the cream or the patch, or if you were trying the cream, it may be worth trying a low dose pill, and even going, starting at a really, really low dose and seeing how you can work it up to tolerate it. I have had success doing that with people. So it is a way to, another way to think about, maybe we can get estrogen in another way. The other thing is that DHEA does contribute a little bit of estrogen. So I don't know if you've tried that yet. DHEA gets broken down into estrogen and testosterone. And honestly, mostly we use it for the testosterone benefit. But for women that aren't tolerating estrogen at all, sometimes the DHEA can contribute a small amount of estrogen, enough that doesn't give them side effects, but still gives them some benefit. So it's something to think about. And that might be another way to try it. But I would say, the first thing to try would be sort of the lowest dose estrogen in a different vehicle. So again, if you were trying pills, let's try patch or cream. If you're trying patch or cream, maybe you should try pills, see if maybe that will do the trick. I have had success switching around that way.
Okay, next question is from Jennifer. I'm currently taking birth control and just started the treatment 2 weeks ago. If I stop taking my birth control pills, will I have to modify my treatment?
Great question. And the answer is maybe. So, it's amazing how unique everybody is. And it's really hard to predict these things. So the first thing I want to say is that the medicine that we prescribe does not provide contraception. So if you're taking birth control to not get pregnant, don't stop your birth control, or maybe you want to try something else. But the medications that we're prescribing aren't going to do that for you. So the last thing I want is a mistake there where somebody thinks, okay, well, I'm on hormones now, I don't even have birth control pills, and then boom, they're pregnant at 45, and then they're really mad at me, and I get it. So, if you don't want a baby, you got to do something to avoid that. 50 is sort of the magic number. The older we get, the less likely it is for pregnancy. At 50, I mean, there are still a few reported cases of pregnancy at 50, but they're so incredibly rare that they deserve publication in a journal when it happens. So at 50, I kind of stopped worrying about it. It's theoretically possible, but it's pretty unlikely. So again, it depends on why you're on birth control pills. The other thing is that if you're on birth control pills for cycle control, the hormone replacement therapy does not work as well as birth control pills to control menstrual cycles. So for some women, they have horrible periods and they go on birth control pills and it fixes the periods. The problem is, even though the hormones in birth control pills are estrogen and progesterone, they're synthetic forms of the hormones, and they don't really work in the same way as bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. So the medications that we use are identical to what the body is used to seeing. It's what the body makes. And so there are things called receptors where the medication, the drug, binds to these receptors, and it's sort of a key unlocking a lock. And so when you have a medication, a bioidentical medication that's biochemically exactly the same as what the body makes, it's like a perfect key that fits perfectly in that lock and opens up the door seamlessly and easily. And so that tends to have a lot less side effects and be more effective at what you're treating. The problem with synthetic hormones is that they don't match identically exactly the same as the hormones that your body makes. And so they're close. So it's like taking a key and putting in a lock. It doesn't quite fit, but you can jiggle it a little bit and maybe open it, but it's kind of hairy and you're worried you're going to break the lock. I can tell you a funny story. Back in college, I used to drive this beat up Datsun B210. And I had a friend who had this really nice Datsun 240Z. I'm old, Datsun became Nissan. But anyway, and it so happened that my B210 key would fit into his fancy 240Z door lock, and I could open his door with my Datsun B210 key. Didn't work well enough to start his engine, but I could unlock his car. So I used to tease him, well, you know, a Datsun's a Datsun. And that's kind of what the synthetics do. They sort of work, they do some of the same functions, but they don't do it as well and they don't do it perfectly like the bioidenticals work. So boy, I went down a rabbit trail, sorry. The hormones in the birth control pills, they work really well or much better at controlling cycles because that's part of what they're designed to do, but they don't treat the menopause symptoms as well as the bioidentical hormones. When you take a birth control pill, basically what that does is it completely overwhelms the ovary. It shuts the ovary down, and then your hormones that you're seeing are solely from the hormones in the birth control pills. So you've switched from your normal organic hormones to these synthetic hormones, and that's all the body's seeing. Hormone replacement therapy doesn't work that way. It doesn't shut the ovary down. It comes alongside the ovary and helps it by putting out more hormone to help support this ovary that's not putting out as much hormone as it once did. And so it doesn't completely overtake the cycle. It just adds to what you're deficient in. Because of that, it's not going to treat abnormal periods as well as birth control pills. So all that to say is you have to really decide, why were you on the birth control pill in the first place? And is this something that you really want to stop? If you're on the birth control pill because you had a doctor that wasn't comfortable with hormone replacement therapy and said, well, I'll just put you on a birth control pill that's estrogen or progesterone, then yeah, you can stop that. I would wait a couple of weeks and then you can stop it, because the bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is going to work much better. If you're on it to prevent pregnancy, you got to be a little careful if you're still at risk of pregnancy, or if you were on it for cycle control, you may lose some of that cycle control. So that's just sort of some warnings. Didn't really answer your question though. So what I found is that it's variable. Some women, when they stop the birth control pill, we need to increase the dose of the hormone replacement therapy because they're getting less estrogen and progesterone from the birth control pill. Others, it's not that way, and they actually feel better because they aren't getting the side effects from these synthetic hormones. So if the right thing to do is to stop your birth control pill, I would wait at least 2 weeks just to get the blood levels up of the Winona medications. Stop your birth control pill and see how you feel. Give it, 2 to 4 weeks and see how your body does. If it seems like, oh geez, I was doing well and all of a sudden now I'm having symptoms again, then we need to increase the dose of the medication. If on the other hand, you feel the same, and it's like, oh, this is good, then we can stay where we're at. And it's really, it sounds funny, but there's a lot of sort of this personal experimentation with medications, and we do this with everything. I recently found out that I have high blood pressure, and it took some testing around with different medications till we found the right sort of dosage and combination medications that's controlling my blood pressure. That's the way medicines work. They never work the same way for each individual. And so there's a little bit of a trial and error that goes into figuring out what's the right dose, what's the right combination, what's the right way of taking the medications to get you relief. And we do that pretty much all across the board in medicine. It's an art and a science, and there's definitely an art part of it. And so it might sound funny that I'm saying, well, we got to kind of check it out, experiment, see how your body responds, but that's really the way it works. So in a nutshell, if you're going to stop your birth control pill, give it a 2 to 4 weeks, see how you feel. And if you're finding that you're not feeling as good as you did, then we should increase your HRT. Sorry, that was kind of a long, that was a long run for a short slide.
Yeah, you need some water. That was a long one. Okay, next question. What are the risks of DHEA?
So great question. And this is one of these internet things, kind of like what I was saying at the beginning, where you see these like really scary things on the internet, and you're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be using this thing. This thing is terrible. But it's not really that way. So DHEA is really safe in low doses, and low dose meaning 25 to 50 milligrams. And there's really very, very little risk at that dosage level. You do get a teeny bit of estrogen, you get a little bit of estrogen and you get a little bit of testosterone. You get enough testosterone for most women to get their testosterone into normal levels, which is where we want them. At 25 to 50 milligrams, you're not going to get enough testosterone to blow, your testosterone up, and get super high testosterone levels. So at 25 to 50 milligrams, this is not the kind of thing that you're going to use to bulk up in the gym. It will, over the long period, help regain some muscle loss. It helps the metabolism with weight loss, but it's not going to turn you into a bodybuilder. The problem is that at really high doses, it will. So I can tell you that in the bodybuilding community, DHEA is a common drug. So female bodybuilders use a lot of DHEA in really high doses, and it works because it's an easy way to get testosterone in. Male bodybuilders use the DHEA in mixed with another drug, an estrogen inhibitor, to get rid of basically the estrogen component of the DHEA. But so this is sort of a drug that's used in the gym and for professional sports and really high competition sports, or people that just want like really big muscles to get that testosterone benefit. That's in these mega doses. So when you go on the internet, you see all this scary stuff about what DHEA can do, because in really high doses, if you're taking, 200, 300 milligrams of DHEA a day, yeah, there's some real risks involved in that. And it's basically going to be the risk of really high testosterone levels. In the dosages that we prescribe, which is 25, 50 milligrams max, we really don't see those risks. We don't see those testosterone risks, and we usually don't see the testosterone side effects. So in those dosages, it's actually a very safe drug. Some of the side effects that you can see would be, testosterone side effects, which would be acne is probably the most common one. But again, usually we don't see that in these dosages. If we push the dosage, there can be some sort of male pattern hair growth, meaning some male pattern hair loss or male pattern hair growth on the face. But again, at 25 to 50 milligrams, it's pretty rare. We almost never see that. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I went on mute to cough.
No, that's okay. That's been that's sort of been the COVID scream out, right? You're on mute.
Okay, so this question's from Kevin. Before I answer the question, she did write in, I am a female with a traditionally male first name. So just a warner. She said, I have had cystic acne in the past. My dermatologist is recommending I skip the DHEA part since I have a history of angry acne. What are your thoughts?
So I would listen to your dermatologist, because your dermatologist knows your skin better than I do, and they know skin in general better than I do. So if a specialist in your skin is telling you you shouldn't use this medicine because of your individual particular history with your skin, I would listen to that. In general, most women that have a history of acne, again at the low doses of DHEA we use, don't have a problem. But I'm not examining your skin. I haven't been taking care of your skin for however long your dermatologist has. I would trust your dermatologist on this one over your OBGYN when it comes to skin issues. If your dermatologist is giving you advice on how to avoid pregnancy or what to do for your regular periods, you probably ought to listen to your gynecologist. When it comes to skin, listen to the dermatologist. So I would say that in general, I have not seen a lot of problems, even with women with a history of acne, but specifically for your situation, you've got a dermatologist taking care of your skin, you probably ought to listen to their advice.
Diana asks, if one is a very slow metabolizer and needs to use a small dose of prescriptions, being 25 milligrams of DHEA, is that too much? I have used 5 milligrams of over-the-counter. Is it different than what you prescribe?
So probably not. The problem with DHEA is it's actually sold as a supplement. It's not an FDA-regulated drug. And so because of that, it doesn't have the same oversight and the same safety margin. And so people can get away with selling stuff they call DHEA that isn't really DHEA. I'm sure there's DHEA out there that's doesn't really have much drug in there. I know the DHEA we have. I know how we source it. We're very careful with it. We stand by it. And we know that when we say there's 25 milligrams of DHEA, there's 25 milligrams of DHEA in there. In theory, if you're getting an over-the-counter DHEA from a reputable source, it's the same. DHEA is DHEA. It's the same as what we have. The reputable source is the caveat. So you want to make sure that you're getting it from a place that you trust. That's a very legitimate business. That's you're getting what you're getting. 5 milligrams of DHEA is a teeny dose, but if that's what works for you, that's great. Again, I'm a big believer in the lowest dose of medication that works is the dose to be on. And so if your body, your specific biochemistry is such that 5 milligrams does the trick, then by all means, get it over the counter and use that little dose. There's anything magical about our DHEA. It's just, I know that it is what it is. And most likely, if you're getting it from a reasonable place, you're getting what you think you're getting. And if 5 milligrams is working, that's the way to go.
All right. Kevin wrote back in and said thank you to answer your question. And it looks like Carol Ann is typing in a question now, and so is Diana. Diana said thank you. Okay, next question. Can I request a prescription of less than 25 milligrams of DHEA, like 20 or 15?
You can request it, but we can't provide it, unfortunately. So really, when we first started this business, we made a decision. We want to keep it simple, do what we do and do it right. And so we really have a very simple business model, and we try to keep things as simple and easy as possible, really to keep costs down for you, and also to make sure that we do a really good job. So we only stock 25 milligram DHEA. It would be nice if we had all kinds of different dosages, but sourcing it and making sure we're getting it, a good quality source, and knowing that what we're getting is, not that easy. And especially recently, I think like most places and most products, we've had some sourcing issues and had to use secondary sources just to get our 25 milligram. So all that we really stock is 25 milligram DHEA. So if we go to 50, we actually use 2 of the 25 milligram capsules. And that's the way that we're able to keep our quality at the highest level and keep our costs as low as we can. It's just a business decision that that we decided to go by. So I apologize, but for DHEA anyway, we're kind of a one-dose shop. The cream is a little different because our pharmacists compound the cream themselves, so we can vary that cream quite a bit for the estrogen or progesterone if you're using the cream because it's something that we make ourselves. But the DHEA we outsource. There are, and let me just say this, there are other places and compounding pharmacies that compound DHEA and add it into their creams. And our compounding pharmacists are amazing. I mean, they're some of the smartest folks I've worked with. They're really, really good. They're up on their stuff. And they tell me that the compounded DHEA doesn't absorb, and it's really a placebo. People aren't getting any DHEA when you compound it in the creams. So that's not what we're about. And so we don't compound our DHEA because it doesn't work that way. And so we only use the DHEA capsules because that works and it's effective. So if we were to compound it, yeah, we could play around with the dose because we'd be making it ourselves, but then it wouldn't be working anyway. And we'd just be pretending we're helping you. And that's not what we do. So sorry about that, but that's the truth. That's why it is that way.
Carol said, thank you for your clear and straightforward answer. Cheryl wrote in and said, can you explain the benefit of the cream to the pill, please?
So there's something called first pass metabolism. And so when you take a medication by mouth, that medication goes into your stomach and your intestines, gets absorbed, and that blood that absorbs the medicine goes to the liver first and then gets spread throughout the body. The liver is where the medications get broken down. And so that's sort of the liver's job, is to sort of detoxify the blood. And so it sees the medication, breaks it down, and then sends what's left over out to the body. That does a couple of things. Number one, it puts a little bit more stress on the liver, and you get a little bit less medication into your blood system for the amount of medication that you take. So in theory, it's safer to use what we call transdermal approach, which means cream or patch, because it bypasses this mechanism. This gets absorbed into your general circulation, goes everywhere, including the liver, and eventually, gradually gets broken down by the liver. It puts less of a stress on your liver, and it means that we can deliver more medication into your general circulation using less medication that you take, if that makes sense. So in theory, the cream is going to be a little bit safer than the pill because it's going to affect the liver less, tends to affect your lipids less, that kind of thing. In practice, for most people, I don't think it's really that important. So there's this thing, I always teach my residents this. There's the right answer on the test, and then there's what you really do for your patients. And sometimes they're really different. I can tell you the last time I took my recertification exam for my OBGYN boards, there's probably 20% of that test that I answered because I know it was the answer they wanted, but nobody's really going to do it that way. And so there's sort of, a theoretical thing, and then there's a practical thing. So for most people, it doesn't make a big difference safety-wise whether you use a pill or a cream. It's kind of a marketing thing, and yeah, it's true. And for certain individuals, if you've got a gallbladder problem, if you've got a liver thing going on, if you've got a big lipid issue, yeah, maybe the subtle difference of using the transdermal, either the cream or the patch, might be worth it for you. But for the vast majority of people, I don't think you're going to see a huge difference. So then really it comes down to convenience. And would you rather take a pill every day, or would you rather put some cream on every day, or would you rather put a patch on twice a week? And it's the convenience really that becomes the big difference. And that's not something I can tell you what's better or not, because what I like, someone else might not like, and vice versa. The other thing is that the cream we compound ourselves in the pharmacy, so we're able to keep the cost down a little bit. So the cream is less expensive if you need estrogen or progesterone than the pills, and it's much less expensive than the patch. So from a cost point of view, it's a little bit cheaper that way for most people. If all you need is estrogen, it's actually not cheaper. The estrogen pills would be cheaper. So it sort of depends on what your situation is. The other thing I'll say is that I don't have a good explanation for this physiologically. It doesn't really make sense to me, but it's just true. And that is, everybody's different and responds differently. So I've had patients that we have on cream and we increase the dose, we get to a pretty high dose, and it's just not cutting it. And it's like, well, let's try something completely different. And we switch them to pills, and all of a sudden, boom, they're doing great. And I've had the opposite. So we've got people on pills, we up the dose, get them on a big dose, still isn't cutting it. It's like, well, let's try something different. We put them on cream, and boom, that works for them. So there is, again, a little this experimenting around with different body types, different people. Don't have a good explanation for why it is that way, but it is. For some reason, different people respond to different medications. So sometimes switching from pill to a cream or cream to a pill can change the way it's working for people. So those are kind of things to think about as to whether you want a pill or a patch or cream.
Okay, next question from Angelica. Can you tell me why you prescribe estradiol and estradiol together and not just estradiol? When I was on 1 milligram estradiol before I started taking Winona, it seemed to work quicker, faster to relieve symptoms. I'm doing well with my Winona dose, but I still have hot flashes once a night. Follow-up note with her. I've been on this current dose for 2 months of 5 milligram.
So that's a really good question, and my answer is a little embarrassing. So I have learned a tremendous amount in the last 2 years or so while I've been doing this with Winona. I didn't really have much experience with compounded creams. I had a lot of experience with HRT and big believer in it. But I've learned a lot about HRT because this is what I've been sort of living and doing now, and studying and reading everything I can on it and talking to really smart people. Our pharmacists are the ones that told me, they're the ones who do the compounding. And really, I've sat down and talked to them quite a bit to get a good education on compounding. And they really believe that the compounded estradiol mix, the so-called bias cream, is really superior for most people than the estradiol by itself. The truth is, apparently, and I didn't know this either, but the estriol part is actually more expensive than the estradiol, so it'd actually be cheaper to just use straight estradiol. But they tell me that for most people it works better, and so that's what we decided to use. Because again, I listen to my experts, and I don't, I didn't know anything about compounding before I started this, but my compounding pharmacists do, and they've been doing this for years and years and years. And so I listen to my experts, and they tell me that for most people, this is what works better. And so that's why we chose to do it that way. Now, again, there's always going to be outliers, and there's always going to be people that, their body isn't the way most people's is. And so maybe for you, the estriol is not as effective as estradiol. And if that's the case, we could push the dose a bit until we get things under control. But apparently for most people, this combination of estradiol and estriol, which is really more in line with what the ovary makes, works better than the estradiol alone. That's what I'm told by my compounding pharmacist.
Good answer. And I learned how to say estradiol, so Okay, next question. I'm 56 and started HRT primarily for weight loss. My hot flashes mostly went away after changing my diet to plant-based. I've been using the cream and DHEA now for 2 weeks. About how long does it take for the water weight to stop and the weight loss to start?
So this is, again, a big variable thing depending on the individual. But the frustrating thing with most medications, and particularly this medication, is that side effects tend to happen right away and benefits tend to take a while. And so kind of the normal expected curve is you start a medication and you get some side effects until your body gets used to it. Those side effects start going away and then the benefits start coming on. And that's hard for people because, you're excited, you start something new and it's like, oh, this is making me feel worse. But if you stick with it, eventually those side effects go away and the benefits kick in. As far as the water weight, pretty common in the first couple of weeks. Most people by a month, that's pretty much mellowed out and either gone away or sort of it's on its way out. I have had some patients where, gosh, we get to the 10 weeks and it's finally starting to go away. But for most people, 2 to 4 weeks is when you start seeing sort of it peak and then go away. The weight loss can take a while. And, it's a complicated thing, because what's going on is we're really changing the metabolism, and that takes a while. So we've got to get drug levels up, particularly with the cream. That can take a couple of weeks before we get really adequate drug levels just to get started. And then the metabolic effects take a while to come in. And then, as I, as I say in my little write-up, it's like stopping a moving train. So we've got to stop the weight gain and then move the momentum back before we get the weight loss. And really, the sort of 10-week mark is about where we really start seeing the weight loss coming. And again, it's different for everybody. So I've got some people, they'll message me at a month in, well, I'm starting to lose weight, this is great. And I've got other people, that, gee, it takes a little bit longer. And even at the 10-week mark, okay, I'm not gaining weight anymore, but I'm not really losing it. And then gradually it starts to happen. And so it's a process. But I would expect that water weight to be going away, over the next couple of weeks for you. Certainly not continuing to accumulate.
Okay. Next question was from Kenneth, and she wanted to know if this is recorded to watch later. I answered this in the chat, but just so everyone knows, we do post this on our YouTube, women's group, and Instagram. Going to the next question for Dr. Green, Jody is asking, can I use my cream to take my DHEA at the same time?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I got it. Can you take them both at the same time? So yes, absolutely. The cream, for most people, it works best at night because it tends to make people sleepy, and then that takes advantage of the sleep benefit. Plus, the night sweats tend to be more disturbing than the hot flashes. So I'd rather get rid of your night sweats first, because that wakes you up and really messes up with your sleep, and then your whole day the next day's no good, rather than the hot flash is no good during the day, but it doesn't sort of have that cumulative effect that the night sweats have. So for most people, taking it at night tends to work best. The DHEA, it really doesn't matter when you take it. For most people, let me say, it doesn't make a difference. And that's true with food, without food, night, day, in the middle, doesn't matter. Again, everybody's different, and some people will find patterns that work best. So for the DHEA, my thing is, get into the habit of taking it whenever it's going to be the easiest to remember to take it consistently. So consistency is really important. If you're only taking it 3 times a week, it's probably not going to work that well for you. So whatever you can find to get into your routine so that you can take it consistently every day, that's the time to do it. And the other thing I want to say about the cream is that most people do best with it at night, but there's a small percentage of people where it does the opposite to them, and it gets their brain going, it keeps them up, or it gives them crazy dreams. If that's happening, take it in the morning. That's fine. So it's okay to experiment around a little bit and see what works best for you individually, whether that's at night or in the morning. But I would start at night, because for most people, that tends to be what works best.
Okay. It looks like we have finished answering all of our questions. I have gone ahead and posted a link to join our Winona's Women's Group in the chat feature if anyone's interested. Ending it, there's one more message for Dr. Green. It's just a nice thank you. It says, thank you so much, doctor. I'm so grateful for all that you and this company are doing for us. Also, Kim Ray said thank you as well.
It's a pleasure, and it's really nice to know that we're helping people. That's really primarily what we're about. So I'm glad if this is good for you, it's beneficial. I know the medicines work. Hopefully we're doing it in a way that works well for you and more convenient and easy.
All right. Well, I think that will be it for tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We'll go ahead and post the recorded version. Dr. Green, do you have any closing notes?
Just don't be shy about messaging us. You don't have to wait until one of these to ask questions. Myself, all the doctors were, really eager to educate you, because, a well-educated patient is going to be a better patient, and I think can get better results because they'll be more consistent. So, message us. That's what we're here for. That's part of the service.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you once again. Bye.